Nuclear power's role in reducing carbon emissions is one of the key topics being discussed at the International Conference on Nuclear Engineering underway in Beijing. And David Fishman is joining us now to talk a little bit about that. He's senior manager at the Lantau Group, an energy-focused strategy and economic consulting group for the Asia-Pacific region. David, just give me a sense of how nuclear power figures into the mix now, and where do you see it expanding?
Sure, Mike. So at the beginning, nuclear power served a relatively small role in the Chinese energy mix overall. We're talking about the 90s, just the beginnings of the industry. And in the recent years, especially starting after about 2010, 2011, and really ramping up through the middle of the decade, we've seen a great number of reactors complete construction and also begin construction. So where we stand now is, over 50 operating reactors and something like around 5% of the overall electricity mix coming from nuclear power.
And it's looking to expand that number of reactors somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 new reactors in 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. Where will that place China globally in terms of reliance on nuclear power, and how will that help impact the carbon footprint?
Well, yeah, absolutely. China has massive plans, a huge build program, and that's ramping up from where we are right now to, maybe 7% of the energy mix by 2030, 10% of the energy mix by 2035, and you're right, hundreds of reactors planned. The eventual goal is to get to somewhere like 20% of the energy mix in the long-term carbon neutrality plan, which will require hundreds and hundreds of reactors. But yeah, for the next 10, 15 years, let's look at 100 or something gigawatts. And if China can achieve that, it will quickly become, it already is just about one of the largest nuclear users in the world, right after, just the United States, the largest, and France, which is the largest percentage, right? France has a lot of nuclear in its mix. By the time China finishes with its very ambitious nuclear installation goals, it will also be right up there in the top, one of the largest, if not the largest.
And David, the importance of nuclear, because I think a lot of people, when they think of green energy, they think of solar and wind, and yet, you don't always have the sun, you don't always have the wind. Base load's always really important. That's why so many countries rely on coal-fired power plants, obviously China, quite a bit. You need one of those sources where you can always count on it 24 hours a day. So nuclear helps fill that gap, right?
Absolutely. So right now, when we look at why China would still build coal plants, it's, in fact, even to support all those renewables that are coming online. I'm sure you've seen as well record-breaking volumes of wind and solar coming on this year, last year, and next year, I think, every year for the foreseeable future. And of course, when you build solar, you get great solar production in the middle of the day. And when you build wind, you get great wind production, usually later in the evening. And that leaves you with a bit of a gap period to fill, especially in the early evenings. Everybody gets, out of work, goes home, starts cooking dinner, and power demand peaks. A lot of places in China have their power demand peak in the early evening, when wind is not producing well yet and solar has finished producing. You can get a little bit of usage out of storage, sure, but in the end, you're still going to need some firm backup supply. Right now, we see coal still filling that role mostly, and in the future, it's going to have to be nuclear instead.
David Fishman, thanks so much for your analysis.